All right, it looks like it's time to continue our journey along the lines that never were in 1946. Brief recap if you haven't watched the other videos in this mini-series. In 1944, the Railways (London Plan) Committee was set up to figure out what new rail routes London would likely need after the Second World War had ended. After much deliberation and 23 years of planning and construction, we got the Victoria Line. But before that, the committee published a plan in 1946 outlining 13 proposed routes. This is Route 3. Route 3 starts at West Hampstead. The route it would likely have followed is what is now the Chiltern Main Line into Marylebone, but back then was the former Great Central Railway. This was a fairly underused line at the time, and indeed British Rail would later give serious consideration to the idea of closing Marylebone altogether. Presumably the idea here was that by routing the new line through, they could make better use of the station and the railway into it. As a little side note, I should point out that another possible way to get to Marylebone would have been to use what's now the Jubilee Line. Between 1939 and 1979, this was part of the Bakerloo Line, which of course also serves Marylebone. I'm just assuming they wouldn't want to mess with the Bakerloo only 7 years after putting it there in the first place. After Marylebone, the line zooms down to Oxford Circus, and here it follows the route of the Central Line for a bit, from Oxford Circus through Tottenham Court Road, Holborn, Chancery Lane, St Paul's and Bank. One of the priorities of the Railways Committee was to relieve congestion in central London, so presumably the idea was to provide an express service alongside the Central Line rather than replacing it. I mentioned in the video on Route 2 that there was an abandoned station at Bank and a deep-level air raid shelter at Chancery Lane, and as with that route, I'm going to assume that Route 3 would have incorporated these. After Bank, the railway would have passed under the river, possibly using the abandoned City and South London Railway tunnels. Then it would have stopped off at Tower Bridge Road, which was to be an entirely new Small U underground station. Then it would have surfaced just before the junction where the main line splits into two. Some services would have gone to Deptford, others to New Cross. This is a proposal that seems to have had basically no influence on the final Victoria Line. The only place where it intersects with the line we got is at Oxford Circus, and even then it's a totally different alignment. As I said with Route 2, it bears a slight passing resemblance to Crossrail in the city section. I also wonder if it had any influence on the later decision to hand the Baker Street to Stanmore section of the Bakerloo Line over to the Jubilee. But honestly, there have been so many different schemes over the years that it's basically impossible to know. Well, unless you're a better historian than I am. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this tertiary tale from the tube. If you did, then please consider hitting that thumbs up button and clicking subscribe and the bell icon to be kept updated on this series and other videos on this channel. As always, I would like to thank my splendid donors on Ko-fi and Patreon for being the extra capacity to my Chiltern Main Line. And I'll see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.